Good afternoon. Okay, we failed on point one. Let's just start again. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Fabulous. Okay, you can disrupt me at any point in the presentation. I was going to finish early, so if you want to have a chat in between, if not, time for some Q&A at the end. So here's the story. I wrote a book 2008, 2009, and it was all about big data, about digital footprints, about digital exhausts, about the slug trail, identity, privacy, trust, reputation, attention, intention, and the business model. And the remit, really what I want to tell you about today is not what's in the book, because you can basically write to me and I'll send you the book if you want it, or you can buy it on Amazon, but to give you some updates on where the thinking's up to and some of the stuff we've been learning about how to use data in the last few years. For those who can't work it out, my name is Tony Fish, which is not the widely acclaimed actor who's an Indian guy by the name of Nail Ni Guppy, but there we go, just to give you some entertainment. So we're in the use it stream, and as kind of like pointed out by Brian as well, what the earth are they worried about in terms of storing data and collecting it? It's a commodity business and it's the dullest bit, so thank you. All right, thank you for actually realising that it's no point in collecting it if you don't know how to use it. And if you haven't worked out how to use it, there's no point in collecting it. So you've got to start with usage, and you've got to start with the customer and what they're going to think about. So the deck, yes, we've got this issue about who owns your data, who owns you, who owns your insights, who owns actually your intention, who owns your history, and where it kind of like gets very scary and people get very worried about is actually, I already own your future. And that's where we're going to go this afternoon in thinking of some of these things. Now, here's some of the conflicts that I've got. And one of the big ones is I've got to talk to you with a very tricky balance. And the tricky balance I've got is you're sitting here as a professional. And you're sitting here as a person. You're sitting here as an individual of one of 7 billion people in the planet. And you're sitting here as a persona. So yes, you're an individual and a citizen. Yes, you're a professional and a person, and yes, you're a number and an identity. I'm first and foremost going to speak to you and chat really this afternoon as you as a person. You're going to have to take off your corporate identity hats. And the reason is I think there's a load of conflicts which are going to come when you start to mimic what you want to do as a person with your own data and how you want others to treat your own data and how your organisations ask you to treat your customers' data. And there's so many conflicts which come up when actually you don't know how you want to be treated. And then customers phone up and say they don't want to be treated that way and you've got conflicts yourself, and am I dealing with the way actually my customers want their data dealt with? So I'm going to talk to you as a person, as an individual. Okay, your professions at the moment and your corporates and everything else just parked to one side. Here's the bundle of things, and personally I think we're talking about a load of interconnected and complex relationships between these sorts of topics. They're so big and everybody loves to debate them, and because everybody loves to debate them, we actually never move forward, and everybody has their own particular opinion on all of these, and you can waste your life talking about this lot. Okay, and if you're interested in the debate on these, I'd probably recommend that you go and start studying philosophy, because it's where it all started. And Aristotle wrote some beautiful papers about trust. He wrote some fantastic papers about identity. He wrote amazing papers about the idea of privacy. They didn't quite understand the concepts of risk, and they really got to what the expectation was as a person. So, in several thousand years of human history, we ain't solved it. All right? You're not going to solve it in a 20-minute debate with a whiteboard and a PowerPoint presentation. Okay? I want to give some observations, which just give some context. And the first observation I want to give you is there is no one model of identity. This is how I could identify you from your data. That will satisfy everybody in all cases and at all places. What you've got to remember about identity, it serves a single purpose. Okay, and it's from I to you. That's what identity is about. It's being able to identify one person to another person. The issue is we get absolutely locked into complexities that sit in the middle of what identity actually is. But there is no one model of identity, but you have to remember why we do it. There is no one model of trust that will satisfy everyone in all cases and all places. There's a famous quote by Ronald Reagan, and it says, "Trust, but verify." And actually that sets the expectation of what trust often is. That once you've gone through somebody's dirty sock drawer and you've had a look at them and you've verified they haven't got bad intent, you then trust them. But the reverse of that, how come you never trusted them before you went through their dirty sock drawer? And we have this idea that you can only trust after you're verified. Trust probably is the most abused word that we probably have in the English dictionary. It has more connotations and more influences than anything else. What matters about trust is the middle couple of letters. It's about us. And it's about a community. And we quite often lose what trust is actually all about. It's about doing things together. There's no one model of privacy that will satisfy everyone in all cases. And privacy law has got utterly confused with sharing. If you've not read a book by Jeff Jarvis called Public Parts, go and buy it. And if you're interested in privacy, and it will give you 13 chapters of where privacy came from, the history of it, and all the context. And at the end of it, you will realise that you've probably just wasted several hours of your life. There is only one model of private, and it's what goes on in your head. As soon as you do anything to make it come out of your brain as a thought, it is no longer private. The complexity that we have is created in the balance of our individualism with professionalism and citizenship. When we try to marry these trust, this complexity of privacy and relationships all together. And it goes back in some ways to what I opened with, which is what I need to do, which is exploit your data. I have to assume that you want your data exploited. You have to assume that the customer wants their data exploited. How you want your data exploited might not be how the customer wants their data exploited. And we forget sometimes to ask the question, how would the customer like their data exploited? Not, how can I exploit it? So, tell me something I didn't know. The next slides are a bit of a model. And what I've tried to do is, over the course of 3 years, is I've come out with 3 questions. And the 3 questions that show, and I'd like you to be able to use these questions internally, show actually the different models that we ourselves have when we start to talk about data and about our expectations. And the first question I have is this, and you might want to do it mentally in your own mind as we go through. How is all data and my data related? And what I mean by that, all data, I don't care what you judge as all data, but let's take the biggest Venn diagram and stuff in it everything you perceive as all data. Okay? And then on that Venn diagram of all data, draw for yourself mentally how you think my data relates to it. Then we're going to have a look at the answers. Then I'm going to come up with a question which says, do you believe everybody in the room has the same model or the same opinion as you? So when I ask this question, these are the models people come up with. You may or may not have one of these, you may have a different one. We have the righteous model, which is my data is just a subset of all data. It's the very easiest one that everybody gets straight away. Then you've got the Julian Assange type model, which is actually my data and all data are exactly the same. I have access to everything. You have the idealistic model that somehow some of your data can exist outside of everybody else's data. You've got the evolutionary model, which is actually my data exists in lots of silos. You've got the private model. I'm so flipping rich, I can buy my data out of all of data. And then you've got the replication model. I want to personally store my data outside of all data. Go back to that second part of the first question. Do you believe everybody has the same model? We don't. Why do boards not agree on what's happening? Why does marketing fight with IT? Why do people actually debate things? Because they don't have the same model internally. And do you know what? Your internal models are absolutely rubbish. What's your customer's perception of their data? Second question, how is my data and identity related? Again, let's draw a Venn diagram of draw up your data, and let's work out what you believe your identity is formed from that data is. And again, ask the question, does everybody have the same opinion? There's 5 models which typically come up. The related model, i.e. some of my data forms some of my identity, but actually some of my identity is formed outside of data. The inseparable model, actually my identity is completely formed by my data. The subset, my identity is only formed by some of my data. The multiple me, I can have multiple identities inside of my data. And some people believe actually their identity is bigger than their data. They want to be human. Go back. People have different perceptions about identity and data relate to each other. We don't have the same models. Third question, how is my data and my rights related, which was the topic of the talk today? Do I own anything? My view, you do not own an iota of any one single piece of your data. You may, in certain instances, have some rights. And this is where this model becomes interesting. So the model of rights, this extension, I have some rights over some of my data. Some people believe they have total rights over all of their data. Some customers believe they only have some rights over some of their data. Some of them actually accept, probably like me, you have 0 rights over any of your data. Come back to these problems that we face when we start to talk about data and how we're going to use it. What your model is and how you've gone through that construct, again, means that you can understand how your team works together and why the conflicts occur. But which one of your customers think like you do? And which model have they got on data? So, there's a gap. And what the questions start to tell us is what you expect is what is different from what others expect. What I believe is different from what you expect. What the customer expects is different from what you want. And that is only going to cause problems. Here's an important question, I think, to go to a glass of wine later on this evening, which is when does broken expectation become creepy? So you have an expectation of the way the data will be used. The user may not, the customer may not have the same expectation. When does that expectation gap freak the customer out? Hence the reason I started at the beginning. You are people. You're sitting here. Who has already abused your data? Do you realise they thought it was perfectly acceptable to do that with their data? You've already got creeped out. You've got to start with you as a person, not you as an organisation. If you can't live with the organisation, you have to go and find one that lives to your data requirements, not try to fit to their model. So, over a glass of wine, when does broken expectation become creepy? And the reason I asked the question, if I took you all to the movies now and we watched a horror film, we would all come out with a different expectation of if it was a horror film. Some would be scared out of their pants, another would go, it wasn't even horrible. We have different experiences and different expectations. But somehow we like everybody to be an amorphous mass. Somehow marketing segmentation has told us, ooh, there's a nice little bucket. Segmentation is broken because it's not based on your demographic income. It's based on your expectation now. It's based on trust. It's based on how I'm going to use your data. It's based on how creepy you get. What age you are is irrelevant. How much disposable income you have is irrelevant. We're changing, and we've now got the data to be able to find these things out. So, there's a new model. Now, stay with me for a few minutes because it's a model I've not presented before, and I'd love your feedback on this type of model and type of thinking. It might work, it might not, so help me. And it's a bit confusing. we had an old model, okay, and the old model is down the bottom here, which is about store, and it's the one that's right at the far end, and they're still trying to work it out. And it's so old, it goes back to ancient times, all right? We have old data, and what we did is we took old data from the store, we analysed old data, and we used old data to set context and give some behaviours, detect if something was a bit of fraud, and maybe do a bit of personalisation. And what we did is we put that onto a display of some shape or form, because we analysed old data. What we're starting to do, and right at the cusp of where we're at the moment, and all of the companies out there had this great banner, and it all says real time. Okay, so that's where we are. We're at real time. And we're at real time collecting data. And we're at real time analysis of data. So we don't bother storing it, we're going to do it in real time. And what I'm trying to do is gather from the rear view mirror. So as you're driving along in your car, and you're looking in the rear view mirror, it's all the data that's just passed. We collect all of that, we store it, we analyse it, and we give some data back onto the display again. We've maybe put it onto the head-up display, but we do something, and it might be in the front window screen of where you're going. But we take real-time data and try to manipulate what the user's going to do. We might not like the word manipulate, but fundamentally that's what we're doing with it. But where we're going, okay, is actually we're collecting some real-time data. We're analysing it, but what we're starting to do is we're looking for signal, segment, and intent. And what I'm trying to do is not do it as a head-up display. The reality is I know what you're going to do before you're about to do it. And the example of this I used to do was my dad when I was younger. And I used to go home and say, Dad, should I date this girl? And my dad would say, I don't know. And he said, do you want to toss a coin? I would toss a coin. And he'd go, heads you do, tails you don't. Do it. Come down tails, and he'd go, you don't. And my dad would then ask a question, which was the important question. He said, do you want to play 2 out of 3? And I'd go, yes. He said, well, you want to date her? Because if it come down yes, you would off. So sometimes we know the decisions, we've already made the decisions, we want somebody to reinforce the decisions. And that's where we're going. I can now use data to reinforce a decision you don't even know you've made. Now that's not real time. And that's why I say this model's a bit like, whoa, let's go and have a glass of wine over it. This is what you're looking out of your front window screen. I already know where you're driving to. I don't need to give you instructions. I know what you're going to do when you get there. And I know what you're going to do after that. And do you know what? The best bit about this piece? I don't need any of your data to do it. And then we can talk about that one afterwards. What this means, in real time, and this is some of the stuff I'm working on through the venture fund that I back, what we're looking at is how I can modify, in real time, the user experience. You don't build a website anymore with a user experience in mind. I modify the page, in fact, the site, the moment you arrive at the site. And the experience you have will have nobody else will have. And you go back to this creepy expectation, because I'm going to set the expectation. The only button on my website of the future is next. Because I know what you're going to do next before you do. Scared? This is brilliant. This is really exciting. This is what we can do, and I can make it so engaging, you will absolutely love it. So, takeaways, which is what this slide's about. Don't get bogged down in this stuff, because it's an utter waste of time, and you will just kill yourself. Well, probably not, but you're going to be on antidepressants. Work out your attitude towards how you want your data treated first. If you haven't done that, take a week off and do it. If it takes you a month, do it for a month. But if you haven't done this, do it now. Okay? Because it's really important to get your culture matched to what the company you're going to do for. Work out your company's attitude towards personal data. Second, obviously if there's a bit of gap, you know what to do. Third, okay, get yourself in a place where your customer's attitude, or sorry, your company's attitude to your customer's data is going to be absolute beautiful match, because the culture of what you're doing and how it's going to work and how you're using data is just going to work beautifully. Got to sort those things out. Articulate your perception of creepy in terms of the gaps, because that will help you understand what's going on in your own mind and how you want to be treated and how you're going to treat customers. Our frustration, which I see continually, is that those with a lower risk propensity have higher authority. And what that does is that limits our own personal reach and scope. Okay, so frustration is by those who have lower risk. They can't see that actually what I just described as my next button is actually where we should go. They just want to redesign a 1996 website. The other side of it is where annoyance is created by those who have a higher propensity and a can-do attitude to take us beyond our own boundaries and expectation. It's called Facebook. They carry on breaking all the rules. We get freaked out, we don't like it, and suddenly it becomes normal when we realise actually Mark Zuckerberg has a deep affinity to the way people interact online. Very lucky guy. If your UI, UX for collection, analysis and value of feedback, and it's the business model elements of the data, suck, and that's a technical term, and you know what I mean, all right, your chances of succeeding going forward are trending towards zero. I would be more polite and more blunt, but this is a public forum, so I'll get told off. Anyway, look, your data, it's a commodity. Its ownership is utterly unimportant. Value is going to be retained by those who get deep and dirty in a transformation to create value and marry complexity and uncertainty. Loads of words, I can describe them more. In the new kingdom, this is where we're going. Okay, kind of like we're already there. Loyalty's dead. Privacy is a setting, trust is the challenger, princesses are brands, princesses are simplicity, which is part of the UI UX, attention is queen, data is king, and creepy is our political flow. So that's where I want to leave you. Thanks very much.